Everything seemed perfect until the devastating news came. My wife was pregnant, but it wasn't by me. I felt a fire of resentment and confusion, but at the same time realized that I needed to make a decision that would change my whole life. This is a true story, full of drama and difficult choices. Women who are committed to the end just don't exist. Maybe with very rare exceptions. Every man knows this, only one worries, the other puts up with it, and the third tries his best to ignore it. I lived with my wife for nearly 40 years. We got married when I was 20 years old and she was 19. There were all kinds of things, and fought and made up. But I was sure that in all that time, we have never once betrayed each other. Agree, it is difficult to live so much time with a very beautiful woman and never once doubted her love and loyalty. Nevertheless, no matter where fate threw me, she was always there for me. We had 2 beautiful children, a son, Pavel, and a daughter, Katya. Now they are both grown-ups, with families of their own and children of their own. I was sure that we were to grow old in peace and tranquility, surrounded by my favorite grandchildren. I am a doctor. Served in Army for 25 years. I was promoted to colonel in medical service and had been retired for 10 years already. But retired is a strong word. To this day, I continue to work in a private clinic. True, I do not often hold a scalpel in his hands. Age still takes its toll, but therapeutic reception in mind. Nastya, that's the name of my wife, also still works, though, in an advertising firm. She is a designer by training. Would you say that we were experiencing financial difficulties? No, we just worked for our own pleasure. I've been to a lot of places during my service. I was in Africa for almost a year, Mongolia, Vietnam. I didn't see much of that country though. My job as a doctor was almost round the clock, and even more so in the military. Then I went to the hot spots of the collapsed Union. But every time I came home, I knew that a loving wife and children were waiting for me. At least, that's what I thought. Alas, it turned out to be just wishful thinking. Despite her age, my wife managed to maintain her natural beauty. She had always taken care of herself, which allowed her to maintain her girlish figure and face without a single wrinkle. As we walked side by side, she was mistaken for my young mistress. The contrast was too stark. A young blonde and a gray-haired mature and male. A daddy with a young mistress. Nastya was very amused by this contrast, and it flattered me too. But, as it turned out, I was having fun for nothing. It all happened one rainy November evening. But have you ever noticed that the events that change our lives for the worse happen exactly on rainy autumn evenings? It's as if dying nature is trying to drag us down with it. It was late fall. A cold spring wind was dispersing drops of cold fall rain on the window pane. I sat at the kitchen table and went through my papers looking for my medical records. On Monday, I was due for a checkup at the health center. I needed to find my card private. Nastya was not at home. She had gone into town that afternoon to buy groceries and cook Sunday dinner for us. I spent a long time going through old documents, some certificates, yellowed by time, and suddenly I found something that shocked me. It was an excerpt from my wife's medical records. It was from a period when I was on a long business trip and hadn't been home in less than a year. Just 4 years after the birth of our daughter, the extract spoke about pregnancy and premature birth of Nastya. Tests, ultrasound results, it turns out Nastya had a premature 6-month-old baby at that time. After 3 days, he died. Then came the tests of her and the baby, the blood group, R factor, and so on. Well, the baby was R negative and blood type 3. I felt like at least a closet had collapsed on me. There was no way I could be the baby's father. Nastya and I are type O and R positive, so our mutual child could not have blood type A and rhesus positive only. And finally, the baby could not have been mine originally, because I just wasn't in the country at the time. I stared, unseeingly, at the discharge form for a long time. I stared and couldn't put my thoughts together. Nastia was not faithful to me. While I was away from home, she managed to get pregnant. She almost had a baby. But with whom? Half an hour ago, I was sure that I had a strong family, a loving wife, and a cloudless future. Now all I had behind me was ruins. Finally, I managed to pull myself together. I carefully put the certificate back and the statement I had found tucked away in my briefcase. The main thing was to calm down. It was necessary not to blaze a fever. The fact that Nastia was cheating on me, it is a documented fact. Frankly, I had a desire to have a showdown immediately after the return of his wife. But I wanted to sort it all out first. The kids. Here, everything was clear. They were 9 years apart. Both Pavel and Katya were blood type O. It was obvious that they were mine. Both looked like me young, as much as children can look like their father. I had no doubts I was their father. But the thought didn't make me feel any better. I couldn't understand why she had done this to me. We had married for love. I'd been courting her for almost a year. Other women did not exist for me. Although I had an attractive appearance and the attention of the opposite sex was not deprived. But for me all my life, somehow there was only one woman. And this is my Nastia. Throughout our lives together, I tried to surround my wife with care and attention. Sometimes it seemed to me that I had no other single life. My wife was everything to me and more. And then there's this, a whimper from my heart. I went out on the balcony for a breath of fresh air. When I looked down, I saw in the light of the streetlight a car stop outside our entryway. After a while, my wife jumped out of the car and a man followed her. He opened the back door and took out some packages. Nastia quickly pecked him on the cheek, took the packages, and went into the entranceway. The man flopped down on the driver's seat. The car slowly drove out of the yard. Yes, the further away, the more the merrier. Nastia came home and kissed me on the cheek. I heard the smell of alcohol. She said, "Why are you so pouty?" "Well, do not wrinkle your nose, Marinka," and I drank a little champagne. She wiped my cheeks with lipstick lime, and I asked, "So she gave you a ride?" Nastia looked at me with some unfamiliar look. It was obvious from her that she didn't know how to answer me. And it began. "Yura, don't push it. I arrived in a cab, or rather a friend gave me a lift, and so on and so forth. You know all this yourself." My wife was feverishly looking for the right answer. "What was the problem?" she asked. I answered that it was nothing, just that he must have been a very close acquaintance, if you kissed him goodbye. My heart was pounding so hard at that moment, I thought even the neighbors could hear it. To occupy myself and calm down, I got up and pulled out a bottle of whiskey from my locker. Nastia looked at me frightened. And how do I know? "I stood on the balcony and saw you say goodbye to the driver. It took a lot of effort to keep my composure and not turn into yelling." "The kiss, is that the fare?" I asked. "Yura." I said, "What's Yura?" "Sit down. I have some questions for you." I took the burette out of the bed and pulled out the ill-fated statement from the briefcase. "Nastia, what is it?" I put the document in front of my wife. She carefully turned a few pages and quickly pulled her hand away. "Where did it come from?" she asked. She lifted her eyes to me, which began to fill with tears. "Did you read it?" I asked who she was pregnant with and what happened. Meanwhile, I took the glass, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. She was silent for a while, and then she suddenly said in an unexpectedly calm voice, "It had to happen sometime, and maybe it was even good that it happened now." In a smooth, calm voice, she also told me that in my long absence, as she emphasized, she had met a young man whom she loved. He was 11 years younger. It was like an obsession. She couldn't help herself. At first she would run to him for a date, and then she took the kids to her mom's, and he moved in with her in our apartment. They started living like husband and wife. From the ethereal love sessions, she got pregnant and he proposed to her. To her, a married woman, the mother of my 2 children. She even secretly hoped, in a love haze, that I wouldn't come back at all. And then everything would settle down by itself. They would get married and be together, but something didn't work out, and the baby was born prematurely and died 3 days later. At this point, she burst into tears. I understood that she did not care about the remaining children at that time. After the death of the child, the relationship between them cooled, and they, in her words, became estranged from each other. Then a young woman appeared on the horizon, and her lover finally left her in pursuit of new adventures. After some time, Nastia took the children and waited for me. When I came back, she met me as if nothing had happened, and all subsequent years diligently played the role of loving and caring wife. I was shocked, to say the least. For a while, I lost the ability to think and speak at all. I was staring at the wall in silence, and not a single thought entered my head. I just stared blankly at the same point. But that wasn't all. 6 months ago, her heartfelt friend showed up in our town. Passion flared with renewed vigor. Punishingly, she had loved him all these years. And my wife fell into his arms like an overripe plum into manure. Anyway, they've been dating all this time, and she wants to start a new life in which you have no place for me. She lived with me for 40 years, gave me her best years, and now that the kids are grown, she wants a fresh start with a man she loves. As she said all of this, she knew full well that with every word she said she was killing me mercilessly. For a second, she reminded me of indifferently doing her job. Nothing personal. It's love. It happens. That's it now. You can exhale and have a drink. What happened next? I poured the whiskey again and drank it in one gulp. You know what I didn't think about? That it's a weird drink that doesn't really get me going at all. Maybe I'm exhausted. I took the bottle and looked at the light. No, the color seemed fine. I figured it out. I just need a bigger drink. Oh, really? How about not pouring, but straight from the neck? Have you ever noticed that a bottle of good whiskey has a wide, handy neck, like a decanter? Very handy, to say the least. A glass is practically unnecessary. Nastia sat across from me and was silent. I even got worried. Maybe something happened, or just ran out of kerosene. She spoke so well, so coherently. Good girl. All those years she'd been conning me. If I hadn't found my transcript, I probably wouldn't have known anymore. Good for you. A true hereditary woman. What are the words? It happens. Of course it happens. It's no big deal. It happens, that's all. I got up, kicked the stool, and went into the bedroom. Without saying a word, I got dressed, threw some things in my bag, and also without saying a word, went to the exit. Yura, you don't have to go out for the night at all. The question hung in the air. I looked at her. Her figure stood out as a dark silhouette against the kitchen doorway. You're not going to tell me anything. Is she going to cry, or do I think the poor girl's been so stressed out? I shrugged my shoulders. I opened the door and walked out, trying, not to hit the door frame with my horns. Outside, autumn was waiting for me. I inhaled the damp air with my chest full, threw my bag on my shoulder, and slowly wandered along the sidewalk studded with yellow leaves. I felt like smoking. Very much. I even patted my pockets just in case. Of course, I couldn't find anything. I gave up smoking 20 years ago. Do you know whose request? Yeah, Nastia. She was very concerned about my health and longevity. Yeah, longevity. It was getting pretty late. The city was trying to forget itself in an anxious sleep. The windows of the houses were barely lit, and only the streetlight sat dimly on an almost deserted street. The cell phone beeped. Nastia was worried about her husband. I pressed from the beat and turned off the phone. And suddenly I was filled with such a longing that I clamped my teeth on the collar of his coat, so as not to howl in despair. It was only now that I realized what had happened. I even shook my head, as if I could do that to ward off the thoughts that were killing me. What to do? Where to go? The easiest thing to do was to slam the door and walk out with my head held high. And go where? To the kids. They have enough problems as it is. I never had a mistress. Probably shouldn't have. Only to work, like on duty. I'd just go for a night and make a final decision tomorrow. I slowly found my way past the black houses, trying not to slip on the wet fallen leaves. Hey man, do you have a smoke? I turned around and fell into the darkness. Nastia carefully removed her lover's hand resting on her breast and quietly stood up to hide. For the first time in a while they loved each other without fear of being exposed. The woman threw on her robe and went into the kitchen. There was an unfinished bottle of whiskey on the table. She would never clean up after herself. I have to do everything, she thought, and suddenly caught herself thinking about her husband all the time. Yura, where did he go? Doesn't he answer the phone? What if something happened? Nastia looked out the window. It was autumn, night, and rain. It's strange. Why does her heart hurt so much?